No, you don't need the.
I'm doing this my way.
He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend, he a legend, he a legend.
Talking on it though, then
He
you
a
can't work it
legend.
up later.
Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items.
Welcome back to Summoner's Rift. In Game 2, Sunning is taking down the dragon, and after Oriana hits a two-man ultimate, Sunning turns the fight. You're my angel, you're my darling baby. Slides in with one of the best Azir shuffles you'll ever see. Sunning turns around Game 2 and sweeps LGD. GG, Sunning.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and we had a pretty good night last night. I didn't win anything. I had a lineup that was like 1-for-1 away from the best Gen G Sunning stack. I had 4 of those, but I just didn't have the perfect combination, and that's basically why I call it parlays inside of parlays, because you need to get everything right. And funny enough, there was somebody in Patreon who didn't have the perfect lineup, but still made a ton of money. So before we get into the lineups that are on the screen, let's take a look at that right there. Brian Dashel, probably Dashel, taking down 23 grand. Pretty impressive. I'm going to read the message that he sent me in Twitter. You know, just in case you need any additional reasoning to consider becoming a part of the community. He said, I was leaning LGD until I saw you picked Sunning. Invictus Gaming scared me, so I was going back and forth on T1 and Gen G. And there are a few reasons why I like highlighting when some of the patrons do well. And it's really 2 reasons mainly. So I like being able to celebrate with the people who are helping support the channel, because obviously that kind of money can be life-changing. Like, that's borderline life-changing money. I mean, it wouldn't change everybody's life, but that changes a lot of people's lives. It just gives you a lot of extra breathing room, reduces the stress levels. Brian, I hope you're smart with the money. I would not invest that entire thing back into DraftKings. Maybe give it to a nice little savings account or something like that. And continue your process, because it is important to stick to a process and not change how you play once you have a bigger bankroll. But the second reason why I like sharing when patrons do well is because I have people who I give picks to every single day, picks for the games, not lineups or anything like that. I have patrons who will have better nights than I do almost every night. And why would I admit something like that? The reason is because it's not enough just to have an opinion on which teams will win and which teams will lose. It's also very important to build the lineup correctly and to go through that other decision-making process when you're actually plugging players into a lineup. So I could tell you, I could come back in time from tomorrow. So I can come back from the future. So let's say tomorrow I know who the two biggest winners are going to be on the LPL LCK slate tomorrow. I could tell you the 2 teams that would win, and you're not 100% guaranteed to come in first place in one of these tournaments. There are like I think it's 10 combinations per captain as your primary stack per position. So it's like you could theoretically make 60, 120, probably at least 240 lineups just based off of rotations of 2 team stacks. So it's not enough to know who's going to win. You need to kind of go through the thought process of which captain do I want access to, which players do I want on each team, going through the thought process of what how many lineups am I going to run, and a bunch of stuff like that. So he was in the 555. He said that he won a $9 satellite into the 555, and that's a great way to try to play in those games, because the satellite itself, it's very low percent chance that you're going to win the satellite, but just to be able to get into that larger contest without having to spend $555 is also, that's pretty good. So congrats again, Brian. Let's take a look at tonight's slate and get into the lineups and everything. So first up, we have Rogue Warriors against OMG. We have Holder, Haro, Ruby, Zwuji, and Lei against Curse, Hacker, Icon, SMLZ, and Cold. The money line in this match is OMG minus 164, making them a 62% favorite over Rogue Warriors. That's pretty surprising to me. If you remember from my So You Think You Can Play an LPL esports ranking, Rogue Warriors and OMG are very close to one another. OMG looked pretty good in their last match. Rogue Warriors lost in their last match, but they were actually quite competitive. They played against World Elite. Yeah, I think that was the right match. They played against World Elite. Let me just check real quick. Yeah, their last match. Okay, their last match was against JDG, and they lost 2-1. But they won one game in a convincing fashion, and they almost won a second game. So that was pretty interesting. Why is that not on my list? I think I had the wrong team listed. It was JDG, not World Elite. Rogue Warriors. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Okay, so it was both. Allergies getting me. So 26. Alright, I'll fix that later. Not a big deal. The next match, we have JDG up against World Elite. So in World Elite's last match, they beat RNG. They were the favorites in that match. I did kind of want to get exposure to RNG, but then I realized, oh, Xiaohu's not playing. And then I just hated RNG because that's a pretty bad roster move in my opinion, but that's the past. So we have JDG, we have Zoom, Kanavi, Yagao, Loken, and Lumao against Morgan, Beishong, Teacherma, Jiaomeng, and Missing. So Zoom is a very good top laner, and he has an advantage in the top lane almost every single night that he plays. Against Morgan, I would say that he doesn't have a large advantage. The only potential advantage is in terms of playstyle. He's more of a, like, it's not that he's a tank player, but he plays tanks more often than Morgan will. So Morgan's more likely to be on something like Renekton, and Zoom is more likely to be on Ornn. And if that's the matchup, Ornn is favored because he's going to outscale and can still theoretically win the lane itself. Then I guess the thing that we should be asking ourselves is, does Morgan play the AP top laners that could abuse Ornn? And I don't see any games in his match history except for Mordekaiser, and Mordekaiser's not really the kind of champion that's going to completely dominate the matchup, but you will still benefit your team. Where is the last time they played against JDG? I can't even find it. So it must have been a while ago. Okay. So World Elite against JDG. The first match in Korea is a Freak of Freaks against Hanwha Life. So Afrika Freaks, they've looked pretty good this split. Let's get the larger matrix on the screen. So we have Afrika Freaks 2-2, lost to DRX, lost to T1, beat Sandbox, beat Team Dynamics. Team Dynamics was able to beat Hanwha Life earlier in this season. So if we're going off of head-to-head matchups, like you can't use the transitive property argument. Or wait, you could use the transitive property argument. So the Afrika Freaks beat Team Dynamics. Team Dynamics beat Hanwha Life. Therefore, Afrika Freaks should quote unquote beat Hanwha Life. That's the first level of thinking that I'm sure a lot of people will have. Afrika Freaks is an obvious favorite. You don't have to know what the line is to know that they're a dominant favorite. So they're at minus 345. That's 78%. Hanwha Life 29%. I've been on Hanwha Life early, and I've kind of been burned by them several times, but I still do believe in their long-term talent. I think that Viper and Lehens are very good players. I think that in the mid lane, that's kind of a question mark, and I've seen some pretty bad play. Miru was hit by like every single Jace shock blast in their last match, I think, which just blew my mind. That was super annoying to watch. And we don't know who's going to start in the top or the jungle, but fortunately, 4 a.m. that means that we will get those lineups before the match starts. I think that the only reasoning you can really have for picking Hanwha Life that will be accurate most of the time is like Hanwha Life is able to win one game, has a huge kill score, keeps it close in another game, and then gets close to the game not played bonus in a third game. But projecting them to win or building your lineup when you build your lineup, you could basically say, you know, they go out there and for some reason Hanwha Life just showed up and they get a 2-0. Seems unlikely. You can say Hanwha Life shows up and goes 2-1 in 3 very close matches. That sounds a little bit more reasonable. The most reasonable thing to say is they go 1-2. The most reasonable justification for putting them in your lineup is they go 1-2, but they're the highest scoring underdog on the night or something like that. So that's basically how people are going to look at it, and it does mean it's a little scary to put them into your roster. And then when you look at the lane-by-lane matchup, it kind of just emphasizes that. So Keen against Cuve or Dudu, Keen is favored in that. Spirit is most likely going to be the starter. He does play Nidalee, but he's not a great jungler. Haru or Cad, he is just as good, if not a little better than them right now. But it's not a huge advantage. Fly against Lava or Miru. I don't love Lava or Miru. I've seen some pretty bad play. And the fact that there are 2 mid laners generally means there are 0 mid laners because the team doesn't trust them. So I think Fly would be a slight favorite there, but again, it's not game-changing. In the bot lane, Mystic and Ben or Jelly up against Viper and Lehens. I think that Viper and Lehens are the better bot lane, and I think that we will see that tonight. So it doesn't mean that Hanwha Life is going to win, but I think that in games that are close or in games where they do end up winning, Hanwha Life is going to be focused on letting their bot lane carry, or at least putting them in a position to carry. Because if you put your bot lane in a position to carry and you have a team fight, it doesn't mean that your bot lane will get all of the kills. It means that your bot lane will create enough pressure and do enough damage to allow your team to get the kills. And then it's like, it's just a math, not a math equation. At that point, it's just probabilities, like who is the most likely to get the kills. Probably the AD carry, if not the AD carry, the mid laner, if not the mid laner, the jungler, if not the jungler, the top laner, if not the top laner, the support. Okay, and then the last match we have is Team Dynamics against DRX. This is a very interesting matchup because, like, we have Team Dynamics, they're 3-1, but they haven't beaten a great team yet. The best team they beat was Solhewan Prince, and they lost to Afrika Freaks. And Afrika Freaks lost to DRX, I think in decisive fashion. So it's going to be tough to justify playing Team Dynamics, but that's probably the best time to play Team Dynamics. Right now, Dragon Axe looks like they cannot do anything wrong, and if the match is close, they could still score more DraftKings points. So you're not going to pick Team Dynamics thinking to yourself, I'm going to get a game not played bonus on all 3 players. But at the same time, they do have real chances of winning this match. I think that Team Dynamics has been overrated in general so far this split because they haven't beaten anybody good. That doesn't mean that they can't beat anybody good. I would not get ridiculous exposure to Team Dynamics. Like, I wouldn't do 50% or anything like that. Unless you're running one lineup, maybe you could justify using them in the one lineup. But let's go lane by lane. Maybe you'll feel better or worse after I go lane by lane. Doran against Rich. I think that Rich is a carry. Well, Rich is a carry top laner. Doran is not a carry top laner, although he will play carry champion sometimes. He is not the difference maker on the team. So we have Aatrox, Wukong, Aatrox. The Akali's interesting. Lucian is interesting. Jace is interesting. But he's making a lot of these picks in games where they ended up not winning, and it was in like volatile situations. So in the this is the semifinals for the playoffs. They were probably thinking to themselves, we are in a spot where we need the top lane to kind of carry, and they were not able to do that. So that was going up against Kana. Kana, I think, is still better than Rich. Rich is a Aatrox one trick basically, so I would expect DRX to not let him play Aatrox. In the jungle we have Piosik and Beyond. Piosik is the better player. In the mid lane we have Chovy and Kuzan. Chovy is the better player. In the bot lane we have Deft and Keria against Deokdam and Guger, and again, DRX is the better lane and the better team in general. I'm not going to sit here and just try to give you a bunch of reasons that Team Dynamics can win just to be different. I think that it's obvious that at minus 476, DRX will win this match almost every single time, but I can kind of speak to why DRX could fail. So DRX could fail by not scoring enough DraftKings points because of the draft. So in their last match, they played Ezreal, Braum, Morgana, and Karma in one team composition, and that is a very dangerous kind of team composition to run because you only really have one damage source. So unless Deft is playing absolutely perfectly, they could lose that game, especially if they do something stupid like give up Aphelios. Deokdam is not some kind of like amazing Aphelios player that is much different than every other Aphelios player, but that's all it would really take for like that last DRX composition to completely lose. I think that DRX, if I'm trying to think about what their mentality might be, obviously you want to win every single match that you can. So they're going to take Dynamics seriously. If Dynamics is able to beat DRX, like actually beat them, I would hope that DRX gives them their best shot. Meaning like is actually drafting well in every single game, playing the macro game correctly, not having these gigantic macro throws. And I think we can trust DRX to kind of to be a team that's at least trying to do that. With that being said, if Team Dynamics goes up, DRX is not really the kind of team that is going to be they're not the kind of team that is going to throw themselves at Team Dynamics in games 1 or game 2. If DRX falls behind game 1 or game 2, I would expect it to be a low-scoring game unless Team Dynamics refuses to finish the game off in a timely fashion. And the only reason they would do that is because they're not sure that they can end the game the right way, like through the objectives and making maybe 1 or 2 risky plays. So like if Team Dynamics is up like 5,000 or 6,000 gold and DRX is just disengaging, staying away from objectives, making Team Dynamics like have a long-term siege, then we could see a very low kill score game. So that's just a reason why, even if you want to play Team Dynamics, that's another great reason to limit your exposure. Just because Team Dynamics can win the match doesn't mean they will be the highest scoring team on the slate. So let's quickly go through the my first kind of opinion on the DraftKings scoring from these different matches. So a Freak of Freaks against Hanwha Life. A Freak of Freaks have done pretty well in terms of DraftKings scoring so far this split. Let's take a look at Ben. In their win against Sandbox, they were 2-0, only 73. That's not great. Hanwha Life in their losses scores between 20 to 73. So that was a pretty good one against Solhewan Prince. If a Freak of Freaks wins, I could see Hanwha Life kind of backing off and not contesting every single objective, not giving up gigantic fantasy performances, because Viper and Lehens were kind of notorious for doing that. They understand that they're probably better than the other bot lane, and as long as they keep the game relatively close, they will have a chance to win a late game team fight and end the game. So that's the kind of thing where it limits the upside of the other team. I will probably have exposure to both sides in this match, because I do think that Hanwha Life has a realistic chance of winning, but it's going to come down to how much exposure do I want to get to them, and that's going to depend on how lineup building goes tonight. But yeah, I think it's more likely that if a Freak of Freaks wins, they could score a ton of points, but they will need the 2 games played bonus. If Hanwha Life is able to win the series, I think that Hanwha Life will almost certainly be one of the top 3 teams on the night. Well, that's not really a hot take, but even if Hanwha Life goes 2-1, I would expect them to be a very high scoring team, because I think a Freak of Freaks is more likely to kind of force them into a bloody team fight late game, or into several bloody team fights in the late game, even when they're losing, because they're probably not going to respect Hanwha Life as much as they would respect somebody like T1, obviously. OMG against Rogue Warriors. So Rogue Warriors, they have been a high scoring team in their matches in the past. OMG did a really good job breaking my heart that one day in the 444, because they played well and Curse outscored Rich somehow. But the point I would take away from that is the fact that they got the game not played bonus was really huge in terms of their DraftKings scoring, because when OMG wins, they're not necessarily going to score 20 kills a match, 20 kills a game, sorry. So that does kind of scare me a little bit. Up against Rogue Warriors, they might get a slight bump in terms of projected scoring in a win, but it still scares me. They are pretty questionable at their macro decision making. Rogue Warriors, on the other hand, I think that they're in a bad spot as well. Probably a more popular spot than you would originally anticipate, but I think that Rogue Warriors will be up against a team in OMG that will not, like I said, continuously fight when they're losing the match. So that does scare me a little bit in terms of their DraftKings upside. JDG and World Elite, this is going to be the highest owned match of the night on both sides. So I would expect JDG to be the highest owned team, and I would expect Team World Elite to be the second or third highest owned team on the slate in terms of exposure. Those lineups will often not include each other either, so that's a big chunk of lineups dedicated to this one game. So if you go to a different game tonight to get exposure to everything, you're going to be somewhat contrarian. That's not an endorsement of fading this game at all. I think Zoom against Morgan, pretty volatile matchup in terms of, like, Morgan can have a game where he dies 2 to 4 times in lane probably. Zoom, much less likely for that to happen. But if they get Morgan into some kind of like late game scaling, onto a late game scaling champion, then we could have both of those two show up to fights and Morgan be more impactful from a damage perspective. In the jungle, we have Kanavi and Beishang. I love Beishang. I love Kanavi. For DraftKings, I think they're both very highly correlated with their team's success. Kanavi even more so than Beishang. In losses, I would say if JDG beats World Elite, JDG will probably be the one dictating the pace of the game, and I could see that resulting in a lower scoring match. World Elite would need to force team fights around Baron, around Dragon, in order to get this kill score up very high, because JDG is often the much better laning phase team, where they're getting ganks, creating their advantage, and then like choking off the enemy team. That's a weird phrase. Alright, let's get away from that. Yagao against Teacher Ma. Yagao is a mid laner that I don't love in most matchups. I don't love him in this matchup either, but he's probably the better player. Teacher Ma is the kind of player who has a great style. Teacher Ma is basically like a knuckleball pitcher. Like, does he have a good fastball? No. Does he have a good changeup? Not really. It's basically the same as his fastball. But does he have a knuckleball? Yes, he does have a knuckleball. And knuckleballs are hard to hit. You can think that you see it coming, and then bam, you whiff. And I think that's how a lot of teams kind of get tricked by Teacher Ma in World Elite. They're basically saying, oh, look, Teacher Ma, he almost got kicked out of professional play because he doesn't have a Diamond 1 account on the Ionia server. And then it's like they put him on Galio for the 100th game, and they're like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter if he is good at throwing a 100-mile-per-hour fastball, because he has a killer knuckleball. I think that probably hurts Yagao a little bit in terms of floor, but shouldn't negatively impact his ceiling. Loken against Xiaomeng. I think Xiaomeng is actually just a better AD carry at this point. Loken has looked horrible in some of their matches, and he's the kind of player that is always at the top of my mind when I say, like, just because you get a lot of kills doesn't mean that you're the one carrying the game. He does have some pretty good performances in their victories, but like I said, I'm not convinced that Loken is a good player. Doesn't mean I won't have exposure to him. He might be a contrarian captain pick, but probably not. There's not many other 80 carries you really want to get in there above him. So I think, actually, so Xiaomeng, Zhuji, and Viper are 3 names of underdogs that you're going to want to get into your lineups. So I could see Deft and Loken specifically getting a lot of extra ownership at the captain spot, because you want to get access to these 80 carries down here. So maybe he's not even a contrarian play. And then last up are the supports. Supports really don't matter that much for DraftKings scoring, unless you get a 0 from one of your supports, like Brian Dashel did, and still win 23 grand. You could always just go that route. That's pretty good. Doran against Rich. So if DRX beats Dynamics, I think that they could play it slow, win through the macro game, and just like kind of run circles around Team Dynamics. If Team Dynamics wins, I think that in the first 2 games they're not going to be able to force DRX into situations. But in Game 3, if Team Dynamics is able to get a lead, I could see them kind of getting a pretty high kill score game where it's like up in the 20s. But even just winning would be a huge success for Team Dynamics, so they're not really too concerned with getting a lot of kills. Maybe that makes them more tentative. This is the best team they're playing against so far this split. So that's basically it. Thanks for watching. Let me know if there are any other kind of videos you want me to make. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep pumping out these picks videos with maybe 1 or 2 highlights in the beginning. And yeah, that's about it. Good luck tonight, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.